let's begin Henry IV, Part 1. This is one of Shakespeare's masterpieces because of its mixture of politics, comedy. Well, the actual reason is because in this play, Shakespeare creates his greatest character, or one of his greatest characters, or one of his most beloved characters, Falstaff. And Falstaff, after this play, had a life of his own. Multiple operas, for example, have been based on Falstaff. So where does Henry IV, Part 1 fit in chronologically? Well, obviously it follows Richard II and the deposition, and it happens 1 year after all of the events. When we see Henry now, he is relieved. Now, remember the deposition scene in Richard II when Henry declares he will take on all of the cares of Richard II, cares in the sense of the responsibilities of state. Bolingbroke, part of your cares you give me with your crown. Richard, your cares set up do not pluck my cares down. My care is loss of care by old care done. Your care is gain of care by new care won. The cares I give I have, though given away. They tend the crown, yet still with me they stay. Well, Henry has had a lot of cares, right? Think of conspiracies, civil wars, opposition to his reign. But now the civil wars have been brought to an end. King, so shaken as we are, so wan with care, find we a time for frighted peace to pant, and breathe short-winded accents of new broils to be commenced in strands afar remote. It's a confusing line. Henry is now using the royal we, speaking of his person and of his kingdom. We means myself and the English, all of us. And we have been shaken and made pale because of all these problems, this care, right? Like rebellions and conspiracies caused by the deposition of Richard II. But now, because of frightened peace, and frightened peace you have to imagine a deer who's scared, right? Trying to escape a hunter and finding a small hiding place to pant or catch its breath. So frightened peace has a moment to catch its breath and talk, even though she is still panting, right? Trying to catch her own breath. And she pants with short-winded accents, right? What's short-winded accents? That's meter, right? That's lines of poetry, words about new battles to come. But not here in England, but afar, in distant shores, in straths afar and remote. These straths are an allusion to the general prologue to the Canterbury Tales, where the pilgrims will go to the Holy Land, and the palmers who, quote, seek in strange strandes. So then Henry starts to think of the pilgrimage he promised at the end of Richard II. Do you remember this? Lords, I protest my soul is full of woe, that blood should sprinkle me to make me grow. Come, mourn with me, for that I do lament, and put on sullen black and continent. I'll make a voyage to the Holy Land, to wash this blood off from my guilty hand. But here he's thinking of an armed pilgrimage, a crusade. Battles will no longer be fought here in England, but over there for the recovery of the Holy Land. No more the thirsty entrance of this soil. This is an image from the general prologue of Chaucer II. No more the thirsty entrance of this soil shall daub her lips with her own children's blood. No more shall trenching war, the making of trenches, or think of furrows as trenches. No more shall trenching war channel her fields, nor bruise her flowerets, little flowers, with the armed hoofs of hostile paces. Henry IV is picking up Richard's concept of England as a natural kingdom. Did you notice that? He'll also pick up Richard's own concepts of kingship or being a king. Those opposed eyes, in other words, people facing each other face to face in battle, those opposed eyes which, like the meteors of a troubled heaven, all of one nature, of one substance bred, did lately meet in the intestine shock, the internal shock, like a civil war, internal shock and furious close or hand-to-hand combat of civil butchery, shall now in mutual well-beseeming or well-orderly formations, shall now in mutual well-beseeming ranks, march all one way, and be no more opposed against acquaintance, kindred, and allies. The edge of war, like an ill-sheathed knife, no more shall cut his master. The civil wars are over. England is one again. It's unified. He can now think of that journey to the Holy Land to atone for Richard's murder. Therefore, friends, as far as to the sepulchre of Christ, whose soldier now, under whose blessed cross we are impressed, means we are conscripted or drafted, and engaged to fight, forthwith, right away, a power of English shall we levy, will raise or muster troops, whose arms were molded in their mother's womb, their English mothers, to chase these pagans in those holy fields, he's referring to Muslims, over whose acres walked those blessed feet, talking about Christ, which 1400 years ago were nailed for our advantage on the bitter cross. Impressed. That means conscripted. He's been conscripted or drafted to fight in the Holy Land. That we again is confusing. It's both the royal we and also England, as well as his own personal investment in England. Note also that we'll see a lot of military conscriptions in Henry IV, Part 1 and 2. But that will be for other wars. In fact, Harry will give Falstaff the responsibilities of being a captain in order to conscript troops as a way of reforming him. In other words, he'll be in charge of raising foot soldiers. Now, we'll discover how he uses poor people as a way to make money in both Henry IV Part 1 and Henry IV Part 2. But Henry IV's ideas are loftier than Falstaff. To chase these pagans in those holy fields, over whose acres walked those blessed feet, which 1400 years ago were nailed for our advantage on the bitter cross. That word advantage is such a strange way of thinking about Christ's crucifixion when we already noted a problem with Henry IV's use of the plural pronoun we. Is he referring to himself, that he will be redeemed of his sin of having Richard II killed? It also reminds you, I hope, of Richard II's own self-representations as Christ. Like Henry's to our advantage sounds a lot like Richard's ideas of crucifixion were to his advantage. But this is pure cynicism, right? I mean, if you think about it, Henry's become holy in his thinking. Unfortunately, the short-term peace has resulted in new problems in the north and in the west. specifically in northern England and in Wales. Now, you don't need to know the particulars of the politics to understand the plot. There's a problem with this guy named Hotspur. The prince is a bum hanging out with a fat man who's a drunk named Falstaff. And then Hotspur is killed and the prince redeemed. But the details are important if you want to trace out the consequences of the usurpation of Richard's throne. I'm not sure the new political problems were clear to you. In fact, my daughter's whole complaint about this play is that the Hal, and I'm going to ask her right now. I'm now bothering my daughter, who is now working, and she may be interrupted by a call. What was your problem with Henry IV Part 1?
I found the politics to be quite boring, and there were no stakes compared to Richard II.
Did you like Henry IV Part 1?
No.
You didn't like Henry IV Part 1? Why? She doesn't know what she's talking about. And thankfully, you have me as her teacher. As your teacher. What?
As her teacher.
Why did I even put you in this video?
I don't want to be in your video.
You're not helping me in my... Well, you're working 2 feet from me. She didn't like it because she didn't understand it. And you guys are going to understand it. That's the big difference, all right? So let me restate the content. To use her Hollywood executive words, or junior agent words, the stakes. Henry has 4 antagonists. He has 1, Percy Hotspur and his father Northumberland. 2, Mortimer. 3, Glendower. And 4, Douglas coming out of Scotland. Northumberland is a duchy in the north of England on the border with Scotland. That's why Percy's fighting there. Now, Northumberland is the guy who tried to get Richard to read his articles of impeachment before Parliament during the deposition scene in order to legitimize Richard's abdication. Mortimer was the heir presumptive. Worcester. I cannot blame him. Was not he proclaimed by Richard that is the next of blood? Northumberland. He was. I heard the proclamation. And then it was when the unhappy king, whose wrongs in us God pardoned, did set forth upon his Irish expedition. Was that another one of Richard II's capricious decisions? There's also the irregular and wild Glendower coming out of Wales. Finally, we have Douglas, who was coming out of Scotland. Now, here's the situation. These are the stakes. Mortimer is now a prisoner of Glendower. Hotspur met the Scottish Earl of Douglas in his duchy in the north of England, defeated the Scottish army, and then, because as was the custom of 15th century warfare, Hotspur took prisoners. In expectation, of course, of ransoms, because 15th century warfare always included a money-making operation, and that was in the capturing of prisoners in order to get ransom. Henry wants Percy's prisoners. Percy is refusing to give his prisoners because they're worth a lot, and because his brother-in-law Mortimer is being held a prisoner. But this prisoner has fallen in love with Glendower's daughter. So those are the stakes. In the next episode, we'll talk about the fiery Hotspur.
Alright guys, don't forget to like and subscribe and ring that notification bell.